All right, happy June. The inventory has hit record numbers here in the greater Vancouver area. We are up 46% year over the 10-year average. Sales are 31% below the 10-year average. And the Bank in Canada, as of today, has held interest rates. So it's the beginning of June. That means the May numbers are out, and we're going to unpack what everything means here. And as always, there's a ton of information about the real estate market, and we're here to state the facts and offer perspective around them. So if you want to know everything that's going on in the real estate market here in Vancouver, subscribe below, tap the bell for notifications. My name is Megan Becker. This is Keaton Kirkwood with Kirkwood Brennan Mortgages, top mortgage broker in all of Canada. I say that totally basing out on my own personal experience, but he's
as voted by Megan.
Yeah, as voted by me. Our team gets calls every day from people looking to make moves within the area. So if you're looking to make move, give us a call and we'd be excited to chat. Thanks so much for joining me today, Keaton. Let's first dive in. Bank of Canada held rates. What are some of the conversations you're having around this with clients?
My real answer to clients has been that so rates go down when the economy does poorly, the government wants to stimulate growth. Rates tend to go up when there's a lot. Oh, and I should say the other thing that drives rates down is a lot of fear about markets because it causes money to go towards more stable options, which is usually bonds. And then that pushes fixed rates down because bonds get cheaper. The trade-off is when the economy does really, really well and the bond markets have to compete for the same money, rates go up. Inflation is the big one, as we all know, or just when the economy does really well in general. And I've been telling clients that, when it comes to the future of rates, you need to realize that it's part psychology of how people behave around the world.
Yeah.
It's part economy, what's going on in the markets, jobs, etc. But it's also part political. And I don't want to get political here, but I think many of us are aware that our biggest neighbor to the south is been acting a little differently than we're used to say the least.
Good way to put it.
All of this together is what drives rates.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer that the ability to predict rates is at an all-time low, just because I think we'd all agree things are a little chaotic. They're a little different. It's a little strange. So I was holding back any predictions really on rates. Like I know the Japanese bond market is going up right now, which isn't good. Japan's a country that has limited growth in their economy. So they've used low rates for a very long period of time to that's their thing that drives the economy. But they're having trouble keeping their bond yields down right now, which could push rates up. So it's an interesting one, right? Rates have dropped, but they're not as low as people would like to see. The market's slow, at least in the BC market.
Yeah.
We're seeing Alberta super busy because when things are bad for Canada, it seems like everybody goes to Alberta.
Yeah.
But, it's just an interesting one, and I honestly don't know how things are going to play out. And I would argue that anyone's making big, bold predictions is just, they're trying to get followers. They're trying to draw in business. They're not being real with people, at least in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And like you mentioned, it's the psychology of a lot of it. The news and everything in the media is designed to get attention and to create a viewership. And so they portray stories and have people kind of hanging by the thread there and wanting that information. But when you actually unpack it from like a real life on the ground perspective, it's, there's more important things that you should be considering if you're looking to make a move now, right?
Well, and like the way I look at it, and it's a little unrelated to real estate, but there's two camps in the stock market world at the like academic level, like all the major universities. There's basically a group of people that believe the stock market is always perfectly valued fairly based on the information available to the public. And then there's another academic group that believes that the stock market can be undervalued or overvalued during periods of time. For my thought process, I don't know who's right, but the fact that this is an ongoing legitimate debate and one side can't win over the other tells me that if they can't figure out is the stock market correctly priced at all points in time, how are they going to predict the future of interest rates months out, let alone, let's say 5 years, which is often the perspective that people are looking as homeowners. So I'm just a big believer that, unless you subscribe to it's all some elaborate plan and everything is perfectly choreographed by the governments, which I don't believe in, it's chaos. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is going to happen. And I think the thing that you have to do as a homeowner, whether it's a renewal coming up or you're buying a home, is you've got two real choices, fixed or variable. Now, ultimately, fixed is the concern that rates are going to go up or the value of stability. And your worst case scenario is that rates drop and or you need to break your mortgage to get to sell or move, whatever it may be, because very large penalties with fixed. The trade-offs, you go variable. Your risk is rates go up. You're betting rates stay the same or they go down. You get more flexibility. And my big thought here is that if you're going to go fixed, and I'll be blunt, I think both are great decisions based on what you just have to choose. What superpower do you want your mortgage to have? It can't get more expensive, but it's expensive and inflexible. Or it could get cheaper, but it could also get more expensive, and that'd be variable. But I think the big thing is there are fixed rate products that have significantly lower penalties. So if rates drop, you could take that. Maybe it's 0.1% more expensive, not 1%, but 0.1. And if rates drop, you have a better odds or better chance that you could break the mortgage, go to say 3% if rates went down, and have net savings. The trade-off is if you want variable, there are products where your payments don't increase. And at any time you can call up the lender and say, hey, Megan, I want a 3-year fixed. I want a 4-year fixed or a 5-year fixed. They say, okay, great. They send you some paperwork, boom. In let's say 24 hours, you've locked into a 3, 4, or 5-year fixed with no requalifying, no penalty, and no real hassle.
Yeah.
So I think it's not about what is the right decision predicting the future, but rather which option works best for your worries. Like, where do you want to protect yourself?
Yeah.
You want to protect yourself that if rates fall, it gets cheaper, or if you sell and move, it's not crazy expensive. Great, variable. Or if you want to protect yourself that it can't get more expensive, that's a fixed. But then if you look at what is the worst case if I choose, say, this fixed option, and you do your research, you work with someone who's like, hey, Megan, your worst case with a fixed is rates go down and your penalty could be, let's say, 9% of your mortgage, like massive, and you're trapped. But if we go to this product, the penalties are, let's say 50% smaller on average. You still get all the benefits of fixed, but we're making your worst case, say rates dropping, better. And I think these are the types of conversations that lenders or brokers should be having with Canadians rather than, oh yeah, fixed is the right choice. Nobody knows. So,
well, and that's the thing. I had a conversation with a client this morning, and we alluded a little bit to that. Is what's most important to you, or is it the payments that are most important to you? Is it the flexibility? It's all of these things, and that's, I agree with you. There's no right or wrong or good or bad. It's really dependent on the client's personal goals, their risk tolerance, what they want, what's most important to them, right?
No, for sure, I agree 100%.
So the market we've talked about, inventory is high, sales are slow. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in the last month or 6 weeks of clients making purchases that maybe we could learn from right now?
Well, it's a tough one. In certain markets, it's very busy, and a lot of the lenders have reduced their staffing because the overall volume of the market's been down across Canada over the last few years. So now that we're in the spring market, we are seeing, like, one of the big green lenders just sent out a bulletin basically saying, hey, if anything's closing before, I think it was June 10th, let us know because we need to go out of our way to prioritize it to make sure that it happens on time. So it's just one of those things that it's tough, right? In some markets, it's really slow, but other markets is busy, and you need to be prepared for sometimes lending takes a little bit longer than you'd expect.
Yeah.
The other thing has been appraisals. There's less stuff happening in the market, less solds, means there's less data for an appraisal to support a property, which means that if you have what's called a comparable, that's what supports an appraisal. It's another sale that happened that they can relate to your purchase or refinance. A really good one will make things for you, and you may get more than you should from a value perspective. But a bad comparable, which is more likely in a slow market, can have a lot of weight. And we just had a situation where someone's trying to refinance a property. It was appraised in March for 1.275, so just almost 1.3 million. The appraisal came in at 1.2 this week. We reached out to the owner of the appraisal company and a realtor that knew the client and knew the market. And that's just the way it is. There's no better data than that. So it's tricky, but that's where you have to be aware. And I think that's where you come in, Megan, looking ahead and looking at comps. And so.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. And I think from a buyer standpoint, the opportunity definitely is more inventory. But exactly like you said regarding the comps, I had a conversation with. I just met this person and found out she was already in the process of buying a home, and super excited about that. And she's like, "Oh, if I would have known, I would have worked with you." And you know, um, kind of met a little too late, I guess. But she was asking me. She showed me the property, and she's like, it was listed at this, and do you think I paid too much? And I asked her. I said, did your realtor run the comps before you put the offer? Well, no, it was newly on the market, and we got it around list price. And I'm in a tough position there because she's already working with this other agent, and I just said, subjects hadn't been removed yet, and I just said, ask him,
So
run the
for anyone
comps.
watching, the reason Megan's having a tough time is the realtors have a very strict code of conduct that thou shalt not speak evil of another realtor.
Yeah.
Brokers, on the other hand, we can say whatever we want. Legal
And
finance.
exactly. And again, she's already under contract, and I just said, ask your realtor, run the comps, because that's what I'm finding. And I didn't share all of this in depth with her, but that's what I'm finding in this market is there's a ton of inventory, and sometimes sellers are unrealistic, and maybe they have an inexperienced
We're
realtor
seeing a lot of emotional pricing for listings.
yeah, that overprices it. And if you get an uneducated buyer working with an inexperienced realtor, then maybe the seller is going to get their overpriced listing sold at that unrealistic price. And it's a tough situation, but that's non-negotiable. Working with a buyer, I want to make sure that you purchase right, because selfishly, I want to sell that property when you move on to the next one. And if we overpay, that's going to make my job a lot harder, 5-10 years down the road. And so make sure you're properly vetting your realtors.
We just recently we're dealing with quite a few situations right now where people are trying to sell and buy, and the sale is consistently the challenge.
Yeah.
It's interesting on the opposite side too, and maybe eventually they'll be right, but a lot of offers coming in, and it's like, where did this number come from? Because in this case, I know the listing agent, and well, there's two of them, and like the listing price is based on comps. Now, maybe at the end of the day, if the market's trending down, it'll go a little lower, but we're seeing 75% of lists. And it's like, hey, buyer, where does this number come from? They're like, we like this number. And it's like, I'm sure you do. It's outrageously low. Like, are you going to do that? So it'll be interesting to see, right? Because it's always this tug of war of supply and demand. And, at the end of the day, if the supply stays strong and there's no demand, eventually people will be motivated enough that, they will be, like they're going to be forced to sell at some point. But the trade-off is that for buyers is like, hey, this is one of the rare times where you get to be picky and make demand, negotiate. That hasn't been the market that we've known in BC for many, many years. And
no,
it's always that fine line, right? Of like, how long do you wait to get a better deal before, running the risk of things could change?
Yeah.
And the moment it goes back to a seller's market, like, good luck.
Yeah. And that's the conversation I've been having with a lot of people that have been, wanting to get into the market, but, there's not a huge urgency, and there's a desire to, have a property that meets certain criteria. And I said, for a lot of them, like, take advantage of what's going on right now, the amount of inventory, the lack of the bidding wars, and just get in a property. It's not going to be your dream home. It's not going to be a 10 out of 10, but it's going to allow you to get into the market, establish some equity, and make that next purchase like a little bit easier versus waiting. You're saving more money, but the market is going up just as fast.
No, I get you 100%.
Right.
It's an interesting one, but at the same time, like you got to ignore us salespeople that make off of getting you to buy a house, and you got to do what you feel is right. But I agree. I've definitely seen more people. For every person that's right timing the market, there's usually 3 or 4 or more that are wrong.
Yeah.
So it's always that balance of, what you got to decide what you can live with, right? If it's waiting and you run the risk that the market goes up, and if that means you miss out, well, then you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
If you decide to buy and the market goes down another little bit, you want to buy something in a slower market that even if it drops, you feel good because you got the right property.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's the key of having people that are just real human beings, I guess, and are more worried about having a conversation and helping you figure out what's right rather than convincing you to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And
those in both our industries out there. So
that's the thing. It's figuring out what people's goals are and being able to find a solution that's best for you and making sure that you understand all the data points. So I know we wanted to keep this one short and sweet here, but maybe Keaton, before we wrap up, like what are some big take-home messages people to pass on to people right now?
I think the big thing is just be prepared. Like the lending industry is getting more and more difficult because of government regulations. So just be proactive. And if you are going to look at homes, like before you start looking, like, and this sounds self-serving, but I don't care. Go to your bank. It doesn't matter to me. But get your stuff ready. The last thing you want to do is find the right property, negotiate, and then find out that, you know, if there's an issue in your credit or you got to get your taxes done or, you know, any number of things that, you know, even just often we'll deal with particularly first-time home buyers. And it's like, oh, hey, you could save 14 grand if you restructure your down payment to use the benefits that are available. But if you're in the middle of writing an offer, like instead of being proactive or reactive, I'm just like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Walk away, or this is the way it is. And, you know, so my advice is just do your homework in a sense. Get things ready. If you don't buy, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. But if you're going to do it right, right? Like it's expensive. I think we can all use every advantage we can get right now when it comes to government benefits and grants and tax refunds. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And yeah, I would say that's my biggest piece of advice, regardless of what's going on in the market, is be prepared and be proactive. You know, it's better to start the process too soon and, you know, myself or yourself say, you know, hold up, we're not ready yet. We've got to wait for this, you know, XYZ versus, oh, shoot, I wish I would have known that 3 months ago and started on whatever the situation is.
100% right. And, you know, once again, you got to do what's right for you, but getting started sooner, like I find Murphy's Law is it's always the clients that are, I'm not going to buy a house. And then something, I always get the call, oh, the perfect house came up in the market. And it's like, I knew you were looking, you knew you were looking, but you were worried that it was going to be a pain in the ass, let's say, to, you know, get your documents together, get your credit checked and everything, which I know it sucks, but the trade-offs when you find the dream home, which inevitably seems to happen, there's nothing worse than like you're just, you know, that's it. It is go, go, go. You've got 2 days to figure it all out. You know, I'd much rather you've got 2, 3, 4 weeks to figure it out. So
yeah, exactly. Have extra time than not enough. Awesome. Well, I so appreciate the conversation. And as always, for all of you watching, both myself and Keaton would be happy to help if you have any questions about real estate or mortgages or want to book a call. All of our info is in the description box below. And until next time, we'll chat with you next month when the next month's stats come out.
Cheers.